Hello and welcome to World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, it is only 1 month until China hosts the BRICS summit in the city of Xiamen. How can the five-nation bloc command global influence while resolving disputes between members? Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has brought in many cabinet veterans to his reshuffled government. Can these appointments enhance his approval ratings and boost the economy? Big question mark. We start from the upcoming BRICS summit. Leaders from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are going to gather in China's southern coastal city of Xiamen for the 2017 BRICS summit. This year, member states have to tackle their own challenges while ensuring cooperation despite some difficulties in bilateral ties.
1 month to go for the 2017 BRICS summit. This year, the meetings will be held in China's southeastern Xiamen city. China, as the rotating chair of the group, has held several ministerial meetings throughout the year. In the annual trade ministers' meetings, which was held in Shanghai early this week, the members have pledged to enhance connectivity.
Safeguarding the multilateral trade system and the rise against protectionism serve the common interest of emerging and developing economies. As the host nation of this year's meeting, China has confidence in implementing the consensus reached by leaders of BRICS nations.
BRICS refers to 5 major emerging national economies, namely Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They represent about 43% of the world's population and 30% of global GDP. Over the past decade, the BRICS nations have contributed to more than half of the world's economic growth. The meeting this year in Xiamen will be a review of the cooperation over the last 10 years and a preview of its ambitious plan for the next decade. In recent years, members of the BRICS groups have been facing different challenges. Brazil has been troubled by low growth and political instabilities. Russia's economy has been weakened by low oil prices and sanctions launched by the US and the EU. South Africa needs to conduct structural reform to further boost growth, while the relations between the other 2 major members, China and India, are sternly tested by a rare border incursion from the Indian military. Experts worry the current military standoff will limit the achievement of this year's BRICS summit.
So what is on the agenda as we count down to the BRICS summit in Xiamen? Let's turn to our panelists. Here in Beijing, we have Zhang Jianping, who is the Director General of the Center for Regional Cooperation at the Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation. Welcome, sir. Joining us in New Delhi, India, we have from another BRICS country, we invited Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, who is the chairman and founder of India's Center for Policy Alternatives. Welcome as well. Meanwhile, joining us on the phone, we are expecting Dmitry Barbich, who is an analyst coming from Sputnik International from Russia. Welcome, Mr. Barbich, to you. So let me start by asking the 3 of you some important questions. We have seen the industry ministers met, the commerce ministers met, and they all come up with different kinds of initiatives for the countries to work together. To you, Mr. Zhang from China, what is the most important thing for the summit to be resolved, of course?
Yeah, generally speaking, I think that this summit will aiming for, that is in order to explore, to promote the bright future for those BRIC countries. We need to create our, better partnership in order to achieve this type of targets. So better global governance issues, including peaceful road, as well as promote development in order to find possible solutions. Of course, industrial development, infrastructure improvement, better trade and investment relationship also need to be, to
infrastructure, better trade. Yeah. Okay, what about you, Mr. Guruswamy?
I think everybody's agreed that BRICS is a good idea, but for some reason it has not been able to work as well as we thought it would because of lack of internal cohesion and also lack of clarity on what kind of role they can play in the changing world. After all, in another 10 years, BRICS countries' GDPs will be bigger than the G7. And you know, we don't have places in the international financial system. We don't have a place in the international security system. And you know, so the West is operating on its own, is running the finances, running the global political architecture. So the other countries are really out of this. And so BRICS has to find space for itself.
I see.
To bring that opinion, its opinion and consensus into the international system. That we have not even work out.
All right, international system, that's what you want to focus on. And what about you, Mr. Barbich, coming from Russia? You're on the phone with us.
Well, I think that the most important thing about BRICS is economic cooperation, mutual investment. Actually, in Russia, the experts are very enthusiastic about the BRICS Plus idea, when you can have free trade zones, not necessarily just between BRICS members, but kind of extending the free trade zones that BRICS members have with other countries. For example, in Russia, we have a free trade zone with Vietnam via the so-called Eurasian Economic Union, you know, a union of former Soviet republics which are interested in having a common customs zone with Russia. Unfortunately, the West, by the West I mean the United States and the European Union, they don't recognize the Eurasian Economic Union. They pretend it doesn't exist. But China recognizes it, because for China it's an opportunity. Via the Eurasian Economic Union, you can have trade routes going all the way to Western Europe.
Okay.
And you can have a free trade zone with Vietnam via the Eurasian Economic Union. So it's a good example how BRICS Plus can in fact enrich not just BRICS members but also other countries.
All right. BRICS Plus. It seems that all the points, gentlemen, the three of you have mentioned, can be some of the discussion points for the summit to handle. But when it comes to Plus, this has also been an idea raised recently. What about that Plus? We see, Mr. Zhang, even now with 5 members of the BRICS, they're still having issues bilaterally and also multilaterally. There's border issue, there's also internal political issue, there's economic cooperation issue, competition issue. So with more members joining in, can the 5 countries really handle it?
Yeah. Just before you and the reporters already introduced those difficulties. So, but I think that no matter how difficult, no matter how many barriers before us, the thing is that we have to promote development in different economies. If you look at the trade data within those BRICS countries, 10 years ago, its trade volume in global trade volume about 11%, but today only 16%. But our GDP proportion already climbing up from past 12% to 23%. So that means our trade volume behind our economic development.
Right.
So that means trade investment within us, there are so big space we need to explore. Meanwhile, you can find that today we are facing with globalization. Even if there is an anti-globalization, meanwhile there is a bad signal from Trump administration trade protectionism. But it's very critical for BRICS countries today working together to promote, regional cooperation and globalization.
You say a must, but will they? That's 2 different issues, right?
I'd like to add one sentence that is, except those 5 BRICS countries, actually other big, developing economies in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, also need to join this cooperation. And maybe they can, work with BRICS platform in order to explore possible solution.
Right, Mr. Guruswamy, do you believe that despite all of the challenges that I have mentioned earlier, that the countries can really work together? It seems that there have been too many issues to handle.
There have been issues. Issues primarily are between China and India, and we are seeing right now a military standoff in a remote corner of India. I think we've got to resolve these issues.
But China is believing that is the part of China. So, but we are not here to debate about that. I'll let you to continue.
Well, we believe, we're not about that. Okay, yeah. So we have to sort these out. There is the issue of nuclear proliferation in the region. China is seen by India as a proliferator, exporting nuclear technology. These are issues which we have to sit down and sort out. And China and India both have got able, tested, and strong leaderships. We can sit and work this out. But the geopolitics of the world right now makes a conflict between India or a divergence between India a requirement for their politics. So this is a game we've got to be careful about and and tread carefully. I think China, Russia, and India particularly, we have a smaller grouping called BRICS within the BRICS, which needs to coordinate its activities even more closely in terms of of trade, expanding our markets. For instance, there is no transport link between India and China. We are two neighboring markets, the second and third biggest markets in the world, but we don't have a link. So we need to work these things out.
Let's talk about these links.
And think.
Let's talk about these links. Let's talk about these links, gentlemen. Rather than talk so abstract, let's talk about some specifics. There are some agreements reached by the commerce ministers, for example, about the digitalization at the ports. For example, about different kinds of complementarities when it comes to trade. Exactly, Mr. Zhang, which area do you think? And give us some examples of how of these abstract policy lines likely to help trade among the BRICS countries. Mr. Zhang.
Yeah, if you look at trade facilitation index in different BRICS countries, actually compared with those developed countries and newly industrialized countries, actually we are quite behind.
So tell me about how these policies are likely to help. Give me some examples, not just abstract policy lines. Go ahead, Mr. Zhang.
For example, e-commerce and digital ports in China has a very rapid development. Even if for Russian friends, 2 years ago, they had bought a lot of products on platform of platform, and then their e-platform system collapsed for a short term. So that shows actually those residents in different BRICS countries, they have demand for Chinese, so for those products made in China. Meanwhile, in China now, we also have very huge market demand for those products made in BRICS countries. So that's a potential. So this time, BRICS summit actually provided, suggestions. That is, we have to promote our, digital ports and e-commerce development, and then that will benefit for those BRICS countries.
Talking about the e-commerce, Mr. Guruswamy from India, we see that Chinese entrepreneurs, for example, and now so well known Jack Ma from Alibaba earlier already promoted to try to establish a platform for small and medium-sized enterprises from all over the world, particularly in Asia Pacific region, to trade. And yet it's so hard because of national borders, because of political situations, because of geopolitics, because of political agenda, it's driving it away from the real trade and economic ties. How do you think this BRICS summit is likely to help in the overall bigger picture? Can it really help, given, once again, all of these challenges we talk about?
Well, there are challenges. If there are no challenges, there's no need to meet. Because there are challenges, we need to meet and sort them out. We've got to talk about these things with clarity of mind, with good briefing papers, between consensus emerging between our intelligentsias in all the countries, particularly China and India, where there are two big divergent nations out here. And we have large outstanding problems. But China can't see other countries only as the market. It has to also invest and also be a market for other countries.
But talking about e-commerce specifically, talking about e-commerce specifically, because that is exactly what the
e-commerce is fine. Jack Ma's site Alibaba advertises in India, but it has only Chinese products on it. There's no Indian products on it. And we have Indian e-commerce sites, And Indian IT sector companies find it difficult to penetrate China. So, we've got to work these things out. There's too much of mutual suspicion right now, and, and intense competitiveness. We've got to sort these things out and allow each other easy access here.
All right. And let's go to Mr. Barbish on the phone. It's hard to hear your voice. I hope this is better now. That is, we see trade and economic ties is really the main mission of the BRICS countries. But, Mr. Barbish, we also heard recently the WTO representative talking about there's likely to be some real tough time ahead, possibly even a global trade war if some countries taking certain actions. So, at this point, how important is this BRICS summit? And how important is this BRICS summit really work something out and work things out, bring them to the international system?
Well, you are quite right when you talk about a global trade war, because we have just seen the United States imposing sanctions not just on Russia, but even threatening sanctions against European companies from the EU that do business with Russia. So I think what we see now is a competition between various methods, various models of globalization. There is no longer one globalization, as it was the case, I think, in the early 90s. I think it is very interesting. Right before the summit, Gallup International came up with a very interesting poll in 40 countries, with which countries do people in, say, Afghanistan or Italy or Russia, with which other countries do they want to trade? And the results were very interesting. About 40% of the people in various countries, of course, want to trade primarily with the United States and with the European Union. There is nothing new about it.
Okay.
But 35% wanted to trade with China, Russia, and India. About 10% with Russia, about 15% with China. In Afghanistan, the biggest portion of the people, when asked with which other foreign country do they want to trade, they mentioned India.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is that India itself wants to trade with the United States.
Well, motivation
and
is
with
one
Britain.
thing. Motivation is one thing, Mr. Barbish. You know what I'm talking about. But to do it and how to do it is the most important thing. That is exactly my question, which is when you have the WTO head in the world talking about there's likely to be global trade wars if things are really getting worse and out of control. Can BRICS countries bound themselves together to get something into the international system? For example, out of this summit, what can we specifically expect?
Well, I think that we can expect more deals on the New Development Bank, which was founded by BRICS, on the AIIB, which is very important. And in general, I expect more people getting interested and more countries getting interested in BRICS as an alternative globalization model for the world.
All right.
In the current situation, when the United States and the European Union apply sanctions to various countries, sometimes without any urgent reason, like the EU is going to impose sanctions on Poland, for example, its own member. In this situation, of course, people are looking to China, people are looking to Russia, people are looking to BRICS.
Thank you.
And in this situation, the fact that our member countries are actually scattered around the globe, like Brazil is in the midst of Latin America, South Africa is on the other tip of the African continent, Russia, China, and India are in Eurasia.
That's right.
Instead of being a weakness, it becomes our strength. Together
we hope it is.
We can tie the world together.
We hope it is the strength. Of course, the confidence needs to be backed by real actions and policy coordinations. Mr. Zhang, let me ask you about this. What about that? I mean, when there's a possible of trade war, can that really bring these countries together and better even?
Yeah. Firstly, I think that BRICS countries, all of those BRICS countries are important members of WTO. We will call for, all of countries has to, respect those rules and regulations made by WTO. If the U.S. or other countries, violated those rules, we will fight with them. The second one is BRICS countries need to work together in order to implement WTO, new agreement that is a trade facilitation agreement. We should be a good example.
Right.
And the third one is all of those BRICS countries need to promote domestic reform in order to improve trade facilitation level.
Okay, Mr. Guruswamy, even though there are bilateral issues, BRICS countries, if they come into the summit, they have to have a bigger vision. They have to think about themselves as a group, and they have to think about themselves as the forerunner of the emerging and developing countries, work something for them as well. So, Mr. Guruswamy, in that spirit, what do you think needs to be achieved?
I think the first thing which the BRICS countries need to do is to become a formal organization with a formal secretariat, a formal institution from which they can work. Right now, it's a floating association which goes from country to country, but you need a formal secretariat to work things out, to work on specific policies, to work on larger issues. For instance, between the 4 countries or 5 countries of BRICS, we will be buying almost 65% of the world's civilian aircraft in the next 50 years or 40 years. I think China, India, Russia, and Brazil have the technology to build our own aircraft. Why don't we have a big technology project? We can have many projects like this. China has got a lot of expertise in high-speed railways. Russia has plenty of expertise in aviation. We can dovetail, join together, create large markets, create large technology pockets for ourselves. Otherwise, all this becomes restricted technologies from the West.
All right. We are running out of time for now.
So therefore, I think a permanent secretariat, a permanent office.
I wish you could have your wish list to continue.
Okay, so
but
I hope
we are
they
running
discuss
out
all
of
these
time.
things.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. I heard a lot of we will and we should, but are we going to? That's a big question mark, and it can only be answered by actions. Thank you from China, Zhang Jianping, from Russia, Dmitry Barbish, and also from India, Moha Guruswamy. Really appreciate, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. And you're watching World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you live on CGTN. Still to come on our program. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has reshuffled his cabinet in a bid to reverse plummeting approval ratings. Will these appointments help Abe become Japan's longest-serving Prime Minister? We're going to ask that question. And who made up his newest cabinet?
CGTN shows you more, providing a fresh global voice you can trust.
And a different look at the world you won't find anywhere else.
We offer unparalleled coverage of Asia, Africa, and Latin America.
We present diverse perspectives on news and newsmakers from around the world.
We want to engage our viewers with stories that represent the complete picture.
We want to share with you ideas that matter to us all. The stories, the people, the issues.
A new and balanced perspective.
CGTN. See the difference.
We have come a long way. Changes happen, and fast, from all corners, different lives, voices, and visions. Encouraged to think, enlightened to change. World Insight with Tian Wei go beyond the headlines. Welcome back. You're watching World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe reshuffled his cabinet and the leadership of his Liberal Democratic Party on Thursday. The move is in response to historic low approval ratings for Abe and his cabinet. This drop in the polls comes amid a string of high-profile scandals involving Abe and senior LDP party members.
Abe reshuffled his cabinet on Thursday, opting for seasoned party veterans to help restore his battered popularity. The newly named ministers include many cabinet veterans, including Itsunori Onodera, a former defense minister who returned to his old post. His cabinet now consists of 13 members with current or previous ministerial experience, and just 6 newcomers.
I reshuffled the cabinet with a firm commitment to make an effort, one step at a time, in order to regain the people's trust by achieving results in each of our policies.
Abe is beset by tumbling public support and a crushing election loss by his ruling Liberal Democratic Party in Tokyo last month. And last week, Abe's protege, Tomomi Inada, stepped down as defense minister after the disclosure that the ministry hid information about risks faced by Japanese peacekeeping troops in South Sudan. Recent opinion polls have shown support for Abe plunging below 30%. That's his lowest since returning to office in December 2012, with a promise to revive Japan's stale economy and bolster its defenses.
The Abe administration is stubbornly clinging to an ultra-right path, which has now developed to an extreme extent. The Japanese people have started to question Abe's stance, and their mistrust in his cabinet runs deep. Therefore, even a cabinet reshuffle can hardly change their sentiment.
Reshuffling the cabinet is just a measure for Abe to get rid of the crisis. But whether the reshuffle will ultimately help him solve the problem, and whether he can stay for a second term, are still worth a look.
For more on Abe's cabinet reshuffle in Japan, we are joined by 2 panelists. In Beijing, we have Mr. Yang Xiyu, who is a senior fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir, back to our program. Meanwhile, joining us in Tokyo, in Japan, we have Mr. William Saito, special advisor to the Japanese cabinet. Welcome as well, Mr. Saito. I want to begin by asking you, Mr. Saito, is this reshuffle of the cabinet going to be a magical remedy to help the Prime Minister Abe bring up his approval rating?
I think that no one's really expecting a magical remedy, but the Prime Minister's goal here is that, going back to basics, that we listen to some of the referendums that have been going on at both the local and national levels, and really bringing in the people who are experienced in this to go back to what's meaningful and what the voters are asking for.
Mr. Saito, of course, has been working as the advisor for the Japanese Prime Minister. I'm sure he knows some inside information that would help us better judge. Yeah. And let me go to you, Mr. Yang, because you've been observing rather as an outsider, but look at the Japanese situation very closely because of its regional ties with China.
Yes.
Is this going to be the magical remedy?
No, from China's point of view, it's a sort of crisis management, saving the declining basis supporting rate for the cabinet's, Abe's cabinet's survival or sustainable survival. So no magical result. But the key question mark is lies in whether or not it's workable for survival.
One of the things people have been talking about is, what about these new members that have been brought in? And what about the sustainability of some of the original ones already in the cabinet? Why the Prime Minister has done and chosen these people? Some people in, some people out. Let's go to you, Mr. Saito, about the new Foreign Minister. Wow, this is a very new person and outspoken, sometimes even against the ruling party, the LDP, the party of the Prime Minister. Mr. Taro Kono, and also has been quite an, shall we say, outspoken person, an outlier even, in a way, in the Japanese way. So is he gonna bring in a different air to the cabinet, or a different air to the foreign policy, at least implementation of it, from Japan?
Yeah, so Yeah, so I'm actually very good friends with Minister Kono, and he's actually a veteran politician. But what I think he brings to the mix this time is that he's been minister before. He knows what it is to be minister, but he also brings this balance that I think the Prime Minister felt was important, where you have a counterbalancing argument to weigh these sides of the argument. The other thing with Minister Kono is that he was also educated in the United States and graduated in Georgetown. So his English and being able to discuss this, I think, garners a lot of respect, not only in the cabinet, but throughout the Japanese government. So
that's right. Well, whether the language efficiency is really going to help, it's a big question mark. But Mr. Yang, to you, the new foreign minister has to handle several issues. The relationship with the United States, which at this point, even though stable, and yet you have a new president in the White House, that's quite a new relationship. And also with regional players, China, South Korea as well. Meanwhile, there is the DPRK issue that's hanging in the air. And what about the regional cooperation in the northeastern part of Asia? All of these are the questions facing this new foreign minister. Is he going to do it differently?
Well, actually, you have listed all the major challenges facing the new foreign minister. As you mentioned earlier, he's outspoken, but for many Chinese, they look at the new minister as a moderate because of his father, also because of his own political views on many fundamental issues. So basically, I think such a moderate foreign minister would be helpful to deal with such a series of challenges you mentioned, ranging from the North Korea, from the bad China-Japan relation, from the uncertain Japan-U.S. relation. So hopefully the new minister will bring about something new, unlike his predecessor.
Mr. Saito, as you said, you are quite close to the new foreign minister, but just to get yourself as an outsider, how would you comment about that? And now Japan is even discussing about whether to implement SAD. That's certainly going to have a lot of opposition once again from China as well. So he is likely to handle all of these chaos all at the same time, just dump on his head.
Yeah, one thing that I find refreshing and looking at it even from an outside perspective is that Minister Kono is more a straight shooter, that he's actually, in fact, pretty straight talking. So that's to some level of consternation to the Japanese people, that most Japanese people feel that sometimes he is too straight. But given his background and given his experience, and also given that he was also the Minister for Public Safety right before this, gives him that background. So I don't think that that juggling this is much of an issue. That I think you're going to see much more of a straight-laced and don't have to read between the tea leaves kind of foreign minister with Minister Kono.
But is this foreign minister Kono likely to raise his also opposition if he has a different policy suggestions from the Prime Minister? Is there going to be some inside the cabinet discussion, if not debate? Mr. Saito.
I think debate is good. I think debate is healthy. I think it's good. I think what Minister Kono brings is context and perspective. And at the end of the day, all the ministers serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister, that there are these discussions. But to bring the counterpoints and the discussion in this so that these voices are reflected and it's not just one-sided, I think that someone like Minister Kono would do that very judiciously and very fairly.
Well, one of the things both of you have mentioned is what is likely to be the mindset of the Prime Minister. We have seen that track record over the past 10 years or so, but many people ask, why is he having a sudden fall, at least in approval rating? The Financial Times, for example, suggested that the public has never loved Mr. Abe, whose air of entitlement has always rankled. But they have liked the stability he has brought since the year 2012. Whenever that stability wobbles, he's quickly vulnerable. Mr. Yang, do you agree with that?
Yes, I think the sudden falling of the rating support reflects the disappointment of the Japanese public that the expected stability, political stability and sustainability has gone. So that is the fundamental reason. And some scandals actually play a role as a trigger.
And now, Mr. Saito, the Prime Minister brought in a new minister for economic revival and also economic restructuring. Is he likely to change the picture? We all understand the Abe economics seems to work to a certain extent, but the third arrow very much delayed the result of it. Are we going to see the third arrow once again coming out? Are we going to see some very different remedies?
No, I think that if you look at it fairly, it took 20 years for us to get to this point, that it's not going to be overnight that we fix this. And sure, there are lots of problems. The third arrow is always being tweaked. But if you think about where we are from when the Prime Minister came in, the levels of unemployment and that decreasing, the business confidence, the stock market, if you look at this from even both macro and microeconomic measures, Japan is actually doing very well since the Prime Minister has come on board. Now, with any administration, complacency and these things come into effect, but I think that the policies and stuff, they're not going to change overnight. I don't think we're going to see any big changes here. It's just really pushing through and making sure that we execute.
The Prime Minister is having this in mind when he's changing the cabinet, Mr. Saito. That is, as long as he could remain the party head of the ruling party with the Liberal Democratic Party for Japan, according to your rules, the party head is likely to be naturally becoming the next Prime Minister. In other words, he's going to continue his term of the Prime Minister. And yet, we have seen also some of the controversy he has created, for example, about the Constitution, about the relationship between Japan and its neighbors, China, South Korea, and some of the others in Southeast Asia, and about history as well, about his family ties and track record, how they look at the war. So, Mr. Saito, even though you are the special advisor for the Prime Minister, but I'm sure you also have your own perspective as to whether this Prime Minister gonna be one supported both in Japan and respected widely, which Japan needs if it is a Prime Minister from Japan, internationally and regionally.
Yeah, no, and that's, I think, a very fair comment. However, to put this in context, that we're reshuffling cabinet exactly a year since the last one was put in place is actually a great improvement from when we used to have a new Prime Minister every 9 months. That's not an excuse per se, but I think what we're going to see here is, given that at the beginning of the year, the Prime Minister had one of the highest rating rates, and soon that we are here, the next presidency, as you have described, for the LDP is next September. So as everybody says, anything can happen in a year. I think the Prime Minister made a very important comment today that it's important to go back to the basics, to focus on what the needs of the voters are and so on. So I think the Prime Minister is reflecting on what got him here the second time around and to focus on that and to build upon that original success. And so I think we're going to see some focusing back to how the Abe administration started off this round.
Mr. Yang, of course, the Japanese cabinet and the Japanese administration headed by Prime Minister Abe have been trying to play an international role as well. For an economy as big as Japan, that's what they should do too. But will Japan, with the new cabinet, be able to fulfill some of the earlier dreams, for example, trying to continue with the TPP despite of the US absence, trying to create, together with the other players in Northeast Asia, some kinds of mechanism to bring more stability into the region? Do you think it can do it or not, Mr. Yang?
Well, I think economically, Abe's cabinet can do something new in the regional economic arena through TPP, although that's shrunk dramatically after American withdrawal. But in the security and the political area in this region, there's no way for Japan to do something positive, both because of the historical disputes between Japan and its related neighboring countries, but also because of the Japan's ambition for the revision of the pacifist constitution that will cause a lot of uncertainties both in Japan and outside of Japan.
Mr. Saito, what's your view?
Well, I think that right now, like in many democratic economies and stuff, economy is front and center. That I think you're going to see a prime minister focusing on this. I think that even through all this news and so-called turmoil here, that the administration has moved forward. We're discussing things on TPP without the United States, of course, but we've also signed agreements with the EU and just
That's right.
ratified the EPA. So there are things there that are happening. But yeah, I think economically, things are starting to take off. The regional issues and so on, whether it's a constitution, these types of issues, like I mentioned earlier, I think the Prime Minister will probably be reflecting on some of these priorities and looking at how and where Japan should be focusing its energies on.
I see. Before we go, there is one critical issue. At this time, we all know all economies are trying to struggle to find a way out, break out of the old mold, try to embrace the new. And also this is a time when the younger generation in many economies, particularly developed ones, feel they're being left out, that they don't think they're going to have better life than their parents and not to mention, and even probably their grandparents' generation. So Mr. Saito, I go to you because you work a lot on the entrepreneurship innovation in Japan. There has been a statistically suggesting even lack of entrepreneurship and motivation to be entrepreneurs by the Japanese youth. Do you think how, in a way, political atmosphere, cabinet shuffles, and also the social kinds of ideas will be able to change that picture?
I'm glad you actually brought that up. We actually do lots of other things in terms of economically being innovative. And one of the areas that I tell the Prime Minister that we should highlight a little bit more is, in the past, we used to set up special economic zones so that we could test new economic models and policies and so on. But in this round of the National Diet, one of the things that few people talk about, but I think is a big accomplishment, is something what we call the regulatory sandbox, which we hope not only entrepreneurs but large companies will use so that they can try new models, whether it's AI or blockchain or new technologies, and do this so that they're not afraid of being sued or overregulated and so on. So this is an area that I think is a huge shift in legislation that was just passed. Very interesting. With the reshuffle of the cabinet, a lot of things likely to change, but we're going to see what kind of Japan being a question still hanging in the air. Thank you so much, though, for the two of you, your expertise and insights. Yang Xiyu, William Saito, really appreciate it. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us, World Insights CGTN, in your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again tomorrow for insights across China and around the world. Good night.